Good morning, class. In the last class we learned about autotrophic and heterotrophic nutrition. So again, just recall of that. What is autotrophic nutrition? So the organisms which can prepare their own food, that process is called as autotrophic nutrition. So and generally plants come under autotrophs. And second type is heterotrophic nutrition. What is heterotrophic nutrition? So the organisms which cannot prepare their own food, so they depend for the food on other organisms. So how do they take their food? How do they get the nutrients? So here, suppose some organisms, they break down the food materials outside the body and then they absorb the digested things. Suppose you observed mushroom ever? So they grow on the debris. So how they take the food? They just divide and decompose the debris and they absorb the material. In the same way, the yeast or bread mold. Suppose if you keep a bread piece in an open area and sprinkle some water, you will observe some fungus on that. That is bread mold. And the scientific name is rhizopus. So how they take the food? So those are also autotrophs. So they are taking the food from the waste material. I mean, the food which is waste to us, that is helpful or useful to that organisms. So they decompose the waste material or debris and they get the nutrients from the things. They break down the material outside and get the nutrients. So these are called saprophytes. Sapro means debris. So using that they are getting the energy. So parasites, they depend on other organisms for food. So the depending organisms are called parasites, and from which organisms they take food, that is food providing organisms, are called host. Suppose let us go to the second type. Suppose by evening we observe mosquitoes, they suck our blood. So here the mosquitoes are called as parasites. Mosquitoes are example for parasites. And they take the blood from human beings, suppose. So the human beings come under host. So here the host, they provide food to the parasites. So in first type, the organisms, they break down the food outside the body and they absorb it. That is saprophyte or saprophytic nutrition, and they follow, this method is followed by some fungus, mushroom, bread mold, like that. And second type is the organisms take the food from the animals without killing that host. So they just suck the blood from the host, like mosquitoes, lice, leeches. Those are the second type. And third one is, suppose the organisms, they completely take the other animal inside the body and then they divide it and absorb the energy. So how they take the food or how they digest it, it depends on the body design, digestive system's design and its function. Suppose let us take a tiger and a python. So you know, these are carnivores, they take other animals as food. So tiger, it cannot swallow entire animal, but it hunts the animal, it bite it, it tear the body into pieces and then it take the pieces inside the body. And suppose if you see the python, it's a snake, it swallow the complete animal inside the body, right? So the system, both take the food material, some animals as food material, but here it cut the animal into pieces and then take the piece into the body and then after that it digests, okay? But here in python, it completely takes the animal inside the body. So later the python, what it do, generally we observe, it coils around a tree, stem or trunk, then it try to break down the body of that animal. So that animal, after breaking into pieces, it will digest inside the body of the python. So here they first take the food material completely inside and then digest. So these are the different food intaking methods. One is outside the body the food material is dissolved and the organism absorbs. Second is they get the food from the organism without killing it. Third one is they take the organism completely inside the body and then digest it. So as the food intake methods are different, there are different digestive systems in different animals. Suppose basing on the structure of the animal, this digestive system presents. Suppose unicellular organisms like amoeba, if you observe, the entire cell participates in the process of digestion. So the food may be taken by the entire surface of the cell. Suppose in which there are no particular organs in this body. So it is a unicellular organism. Amoeba is like this. Suppose if it want to go towards the food material, if it observes a food particle here, so it wants to move towards the food. So it forms the legs in that direction. There will not be any permanent legs. So they form the legs in which direction they wants to go. So basing on the cytoplasm, they forms the finger-like structures. Those are known as pseudopodia. Pseudo means false, podia means legs. So it forms the pseudopodia towards the food, and later it will engulf the food and forms a vacuole like this. So after that, that vacuole comes into the body, and inside the body, in the vacuole, the food get digested. So here there will not be any particular digestive system, but using some chemicals in the vacuole, it digests the food. These are unicellular organism, it is example. So another unicellular organism is Paramecium. So it will have a peculiar shape like a slipper. So it is known as slipper animalcule. So this is also unicellular organism, but here the entire body will not participate in taking the food, but it will have a special part that is known as cytostome. So it is just like mouth in other animals. So it is also we find in the water. So here the entire body is covered with hair-like structures called cilia. So these cilia, they continuously move and they make some movements in the water. So by that movement, the food material comes towards the cytostome and they get inside the body, and inside the body they will have some vacuoles. In that the food get digested. So this is Paramecium. So these are the unicellular organisms. So not only the animals, but some plants also heterotrophs. So one example for that is Cuscuta, which is given in our textbook. Now let us come to the heterotrophic plants. In your previous class you have learnt about some heterotrophic plants like Drosera, Utricularia, Nepenthes, which grow in the soil which lack nitrogen. So for the nitrogen, they depend on the organisms. So here we have another heterotrophic plant, that is Cuscuta. It is otherwise known as dodder. So if you observe the plant, it is like a thin, slender, it will have thin, slender stem. It will not have leaves. So the leaves are very reduced and they are like scales. So generally in plants, the leaves prepare food. So here the leaves are absent. So there is no mechanism for preparing food. So generally they depend on others. So here the cuscuta, they depend on other plants. So the host is a plant and the parasite is also a plant. So here a special particular parts are present in this. Those are known as hastoria. So these are root-like structures which is helpful for them to absorb food from the host. So if you observe the life cycle of this cuscuta, suppose generally when the seed germinates, it gives first the root and then the stem and leaves like this. So here in cuscuta also, when the seed germinates, it gives anchoring root and then sends out stem which is in spiral in fashion. So these stem, they try to find the host. When this stem find the host, it try to coils around the stem and then it sends out hastoria. Hastoria are some root-like structures which is helpful to fix to the host. So with the help of hastoria, they take the food from the host. So this spiral stem, it coils around the host and sends out hastoria and fixed to that stem. So when it grows, the first formed root, it rots away and then again it forms another hastoria. In that way, it forms some coils around this host and it finds some another tree. It will see for the another plant. So like that, it will form a web-like structure. So this is about cuscuta. So they get their nutrients from other plant. So this is parasitic plant. So let us learn about nutrition in human beings. So as we are multicellular organisms, we need a complex digestive system. So it is always known as alimentary canal, which starts from the mouth and ends with anus. What is digestion? You see, in photosynthesis, the plants, they use simple molecules and they form food, complex food molecule. So the digestion is simply reverse to the photosynthesis. In digestion, the complex food molecules divides into simple molecules. So this is nothing but digestion. So why digestion is needed? We cannot absorb the complex molecules into the blood. So to absorb, the food material is to be digested. They should be modified into simple form. So that's why the digestion is needed. So here in human digestive system, so the first part is mouth. So if you observe the mouth, we will have teeth, tongue and salivary glands. So we know about the teeth. We have different types of teeth to bite the food and chew the food. And tongue, it is also helpful for food intake. And salivary glands, we have 3 pairs of salivary glands which are located, one pair is located near the ears and second pair is under the jaws and another pair is below the tongue. And these salivary glands secretes a juice which is called saliva and it is sent through the salivary ducts into the mouth or buccal cavity. We call the mouth as buccal cavity. So the food in the mouth, it mix up with the saliva. So these salivary glands secretes juice called saliva. And this saliva contains an enzyme called ptyalin. Ptyalin is an enzyme, so it is a chemical. So in the digestive system, some chemicals are present which divides the complex materials into simple ones. So in the saliva, we have the enzyme called ptyalin. And each enzyme works on a special food, a particular respective food. That food material is called as substrate. So here for the ptyalin, the substrate is carbohydrates. That means the ptyalin works on carbohydrates. So the ptyalin, it divides the carbohydrates and it makes them into simple ones, that is maltose. So that's how the carbohydrates in the food, to some extent, they get digested in our mouth and they form maltose. So later, with the help of tongue, the food from the pharynx, it enters to the next part, esophagus. So the first part is mouth, the second one is esophagus. So esophagus, it is otherwise known as food pipe. So this is muscular structure and some contractions and expansions happens in this. So when we swallow the food, the esophagus expands like this. The food pipe, after entering the food, it expands and then it contracts. So in this way it sends the, so using contractions and expansions, it sends the food to the stomach. So these are called as peristaltic movements. So using peristaltic movements, the esophagus sends the food from the buccal cavity to the stomach. So the next part is stomach. So stomach, generally you see the part here, it is like a sack. So we can store the food for some time in the sack, and it contains so many muscles in this, so it is helpful for grinding the food also. So stomach, it contains some gastric glands. These glands, they secrete juice which is known as gastric juice. So in stomach we have this gastric juice and acid also. So what are present in the stomach? Gastric glands which secrete gastric juice and acid. So again, for digestion of food we need enzymes, just we have learnt. So in gastric juice, what are the enzymes present and why this HCl is useful? So gastric juice contains some enzymes, and very important enzyme in that is pepsin. And this pepsin, it works on, so the substrate for this pepsin is proteins. So this pepsin works on proteins and it divides into peptones. So the pepsin, the substrate for this pepsin is proteins, and the pepsin divides the proteins into peptones, the next level. So pepsin digests proteins. Okay. Next, HCl. What is HCl? It is hydrochloric acid. As you know, acid we use in bathrooms like that. So why generally we use the acids? So they kill the germs. In the same way, the acid in our digestive system also helpful to kill some organisms, bacteria, harmful bacteria. To kill the bacteria, it is helpful, and to provide acidic medium. The enzymes in the stomach, they work properly, effectively in the acidic medium. So that medium also provided by this HCl. So in that way, stomach, the pepsins are digested. So now the food is partially digested in this stomach. Some carbohydrates are digested in the mouth and they turned into maltose, and some proteins are digested here in the stomach. So the food is partially digested and which is in a semi-solid in shape. So that is known as chyme. So now the food present in the stomach is called as chyme. So now the partially digested food has to enter into the next part, which is known as small intestine. So the next part is small intestine. But this starting part of intestine is known as duodenum, which is in U shape. This is duodenum. So here two glands are present in our digestive system, which are helpful for the digestion. So that is, one is the liver, the biggest gland in our body, liver. So it is present in our right side of the body, and the juice produced in liver is known as bile juice. It is important that the bile juice contains no enzymes but contains some chemicals which is helpful for the digestion of fats. The fats are get digested in the small intestine. The enzymes in the small intestine, they digest the fats. So for that process, the fat should be formed into smaller molecules. So with the help of bile juice, it happens. So that process is known as emulsification. So the liver produces bile juice which are helpful for the emulsification. So the bigger fat molecules turn into smaller molecules. But no digestion takes place here, no enzymes are present. Only the fats are converted into small molecules. That is known as emulsification. And one more gland is opened into the duodenum, that is pancreas. So this pancreas is a leaf-like structure which secretes a juice called pancreatic juice. So this pancreatic juice also contains so many enzymes which are helpful for the digestion of the carbohydrates, proteins and the fats also. So the enzymes are, one is trypsin. So these enzymes and on which substrate they works and what they forms is very important. So the first one is trypsin, second is amylopsin, and third one is lipase. As you have the table in the page number 15 in your textbook, you can observe there the trypsin works on proteins and they convert the proteins into peptones. Amylopsin works on carbohydrates and they convert into maltose. Lipase it works on lipids and amino fats and they turn into fatty acids. So the partially digested food is called as chyme. So it's stored in the stomach. Now the food has to enter into the intestine to get digested, but a complete food at a time it will not be sent. So here there will be a valve-like structure which is known as pyloric sphincter. So now the food enters to the small intestine, and here the glands present are known as intestinal glands and they secrete the juice is called intestinal juice. So in the intestinal juice, what are the enzymes present are peptidases and sucrase. So peptidases, they work on peptones and they convert the proteins into amino acids. Final product will form here, amino acids. So here the peptidases works on peptones and they convert the proteins into amino acids. So that complete digestion takes place in this small intestine. The second one is sucrase, which works on sucrose and converts this into glucose, which is the simple form of the carbohydrate, and it absorbs into the blood. So next, so that's how the digestion takes place. So in the mouth the carbohydrates are get digested, in the stomach some proteins and carbohydrates, and in the duodenum also some proteins, carbohydrates. In the intestine the complete food molecules are digested. So now the second thing is absorption. So the complete digestion takes place in the intestine. So now the food has to be entered into the blood. So that is called as absorption. So the digested food now enters to the blood vessels. So it takes place, the absorption takes place in the small intestine. So here we can observe some small finger-like structures in the small intestine. So if you observe one finger-like structure, it will have some blood vessels and some lymph vessels also. So The digested food from the small intestine, it enters to the blood vessel. So that is known as absorption. So the digested food absorbs into the blood vessel. So now the blood carries that digested food to the different parts of our body, ultimately to the cell for getting energy. So this is absorption. So the absorption takes place in the small intestine in the finger-like structures. These are called as villi. So why these villi are helpful in our digestive system? First point is to absorb the food, and second is to increase the surface area. So if there are no villi, the surface area will be less, so less food is absorbed. So by this villi, the surface area will be increased and food will be, the absorption of the food will be more. So that is about absorption. The absorption takes place in the small intestine. So after this absorption, the rest of the food material enters to the large intestine. Here the water is absorbed. So after the absorption of water, the rest of this material sends through the anus. It is expelled. Large intestine, the maximum of water is reabsorbed and the remaining material is expelled, which is known as defecation. So the waste material is sent out through the anus. That process is known as defecation. The partially digested food chyme is present in stomach, and next it enters to the small intestine for the next process of digestion. But the entire food is not sent at a time. So here at the stomach, a valve is present which is known as pyloric sphincter. So this allows the passage to open and the food material enters to the stomach and then it closes. So the food is stopped. So like that, the pyloric sphincter voluntarily it works. When it needs, it opens, it sends the food into the small intestine and then it closes. So that is the function of the pyloric sphincter, which is present at the junction of the stomach and duodenum. So human digestive system, it functions remarkably. Suppose when it is our favorite food, we take it in excess dose. In functions also we take excess food. So what happens then? So if we take the food which contains more fats, it gives the sensation of vomiting. So what is vomiting? Suppose if we take the food which contains some harmful poisonous materials or which is unwanted to the body, the stomach tries to send the food outside. So that is nothing but vomiting. So what happens in the vomitings? In the esophagus, the peristaltic movements helps the food enters from the mouth to stomach. Here reverse peristaltic movements happens. So the stomach, using this reverse movements, it sends the food to outside from the mouth. This is vomitings. So that's how the stomach sends the unwanted or poisonous material to outside. Next is sometimes we observe some vomitings which are in greenish color. These are called as bilious or liverish. So they are in bitter in taste. So they contain some fatty acids. When we take more fats over a long period of time, we have this condition which leads to nausea. So how to maintain good health regarding this digestive system? So we should take simple and balanced diet and eating them in a leisurely manner. And thorough mastication is needed. Mastication means chewing the food thoroughly. Then the saliva will be produced more and it will help for the digestion. And next, avoiding taking violent exercise after immediately after taking the food. We should not do severe exercise. Just walking is preferable. That's all. And next, plenty of water. We should take plenty of water for the cleanly maintenance of the bowels, that is intestine. But immediately after taking food, the water should not be taken, but after some time, giving some pause, we should take the water. That is very helpful for our good health of the intestine or bowels. In the same way, roughages, fiber containing food also help for the good health of the digestive system. So these fibers, in which food material they contain? In which food materials fibers are present? Mostly in plant products these are present. So fiber, if we take fiber rich food, that avoids constipation and keeps our bowels clean and healthy. So what happens if we don't take the food in time? So people nowadays, they follow hectic lifestyle, so it leads to ulcers. So if we don't take food in time, that may leads to ulcers, ultimately to cancers. So food should be taken in time. Nutrition, so taking of food that helps for performing our daily functions in a proper way. So nutrition means taking of nutrients. So balanced diet should be taken. What is balanced diet? Taking of required nutrients in required amounts. It should not be either more or less. Suppose the food which is lack of one or more nutrients, then it is called as malnutrition. So what are the diseases human beings get due to malnutrition? Before that, let us know what are the causes of malnutrition. So why we don't take food, nutritious food? So the reasons may be poor health, willful starvation. Some people by taking the name of God, they keep starvation. So that is also leads to malnutrition. And lack of awareness of nutritional habits. So before taking food and after using toilets, we should wash our hands properly. If not, it also leads to some malnutrition. And socio-economic factors also. These all lead to the malnutrition. So what are the diseases we get due to malnutrition? So let us go to that topic.